Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, Connected Life peeps, we got a treat for you today. I'm here with a friend of Abby and I's named Rachel. Say hello, Rachel.
Hello, hello.
I'm really excited to have Rachel on today. She's one of our consultants as well does her own consulting business, and she's around our team, and it has been so beautiful to be part of your journey, Rachel.
Aww, yeah.
Yeah, and you have some incredible things to share about your own personal life that Abby and I chatted, and we were like, we should have Rachel participate on the podcast because of your story.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, it's going to be good. We're going to get into trauma.
Woohoo! Just some light, easy, breezy Thursday conversation.
Yeah, totally. Some trauma conversation. We're going to get into some eating disorder conversation, which for years Rachel referred to as ED.
Yeah.
And people who aren't part of the
people who are men might have a different definition of that.
So you may have dialogued with people about it and said, yeah, I got my ED that I have, and probably left some people scratching their heads.
Yeah. After I realized what other people thought it meant, I had to really rethink a lot of conversations that I've had.
Is that do people actually refer to eating disorders as ED in the community?
Inside the community, yeah.
Yeah.
People will call it ED.
Yeah. Outside the community, people just think
I'm talking about a member that I don't have and have never had before. Just to clarify.
when you told us about that, when you had, because you kind of had an aha of what that was.
100%. I was sitting there and you guys were talking about it as joking around, and I couldn't understand why you guys were making jokes about eating disorders. I was like, I don't understand this joke at all.
We're like, wait, we're on two different pages. Isn't that funny how communication can be so, people can have two entirely different experiences just simply over miscommunication.
So you're describing marriage.
Rachel is actually married. You've been married for how long?
Ta-da. We just celebrated our 4th year.
Yeah, 4 years. Wow. Well, that's going to be a huge part of this conversation.
It is.
As we start to jump into it, is there anything you want to say before we dive in?
I'm just really happy to be here. I always think that I kind of had in my mind two separate Justin and Abby's. The Justin and Abby that I see on a casual weekend, and then the Justin and Abby that shows up in my house every time I listen to your podcast. So I'm excited to be here with this Justin, with podcast Justin.
Are we still the same people though?
Yeah, you guys are the same. Authentically, you guys show up the same. I just have in my mind my famous friends on the podcast that I listen to on my mornings, and my normal friends that I see on a weekend.
That's hysterical. I don't think I'd ever even use the word famous, but I love that.
You guys are very delightfully normal.
We are delightfully normal.
You don't think of yourselves as a big deal.
I really don't think we are.
I think you're a big deal.
I think we're fun people though.
That feels true.
I like being fun. So with that said, we're going to have some fun and also get serious on this podcast. I want to go into your early stories because you have a wild childhood that I think is just if I'm on the other end of it, I'm like, what? What happened? That's crazy. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, it's a little niche. I was a missionary kid. So I always think of that joke of you grew up in Asia, but why are you white? I thought that encompasses me. But my parents raised me in Thailand, and this very, very tiny, tiny, tiny town called Khon Kaen. Try to say that 5 times fast. And yeah, they were missionaries. I was one of 4 kids, so I was the baby of the family. I was the only one who was born in that country.
Oh, really?
Yeah, everyone else kind of had a life in the States. My brother, not so much. He only lived there for about 2 years, but had a U.S. life and then had to move. but I was like born and raised, had no idea of what life was like outside
So
of
you're
that country.
actually Thai, basically.
Well,
You're
yes
Thai
and no.
in a white person's body?
I'm Thai in a white person's body. I do think I have a lot of like kind of more Asian mannerisms and like Asian ways of being. A joke that I like to tell people is that when I was a kid, I knew that I wasn't Asian. Like people pointed it out enough, like, and we got stared at a lot because the town we lived in, we were like the only white people for a long time. So we got stared at a lot. So I knew that I wasn't white.
You mean Thai?
I knew that I wasn't Thai, but I also didn't feel like I was white. So I remember for the first time, this is going to sound offensive, but this is just what I thought. This is a 6-year-old innocent brain, is that I saw J-Lo in a movie and I thought that must be what I look like. I must be like Hispanic because I'm somewhere in the middle of between a white person and an Asian person. And so for years of my life, I kind of thought, that's true. I look like J-Lo. I'm in the middle ground.
You look nothing like J-Lo.
No, I don't at all. But I mean, I was 6. What are you going to say?
I love it. So from being born till when? How long?
I was there till I was 16.
Okay. What was that like growing up in there?
Well, it was really traumatizing, I will say. There was a lot of things that were really hard about it. I think, my mom was at the time undiagnosed bipolar. Later on, she was diagnosed. So a lot of my life, she homeschooled us. So we were home a lot with her. And so a lot of my life, sorry, go ahead.
So you're in just a country that's feels like you're very outside of everything. And then you're actually then really outside because you're kind of in this homeschool environment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like there was a lot of components that made it really isolating and really lonely. And part of that was that we just didn't, I guess, fit with everyone. Like there's this feeling that you kind of already have, which is that I don't really belong here. And I don't really like fully fit with everybody else. And then we just have a lot of things that are isolating. Like, a lot of missionaries sometimes will have like a community of people that they're kind of like doing work with. That wasn't what my parents did. It was like kind of completely off on their own. So we didn't really like have people around that looked like us or that were kind of like on the team with us.
Or that you could relate to and go talk to about the difficulties or the pressures, or other missionary kids are like, yeah, mom and dad are jerks, whatever, like.
Yeah, a little bit later in life, we did get some, what I'd like to think of as like my white people friends. And I had some of those like a little bit later in life. But as far as like my early childhood, most of my life was just about being the one white person in the sea of not me. And then because my mom was bipolar, she was depressed a lot. So she was pretty absent for a lot of my life, like just kind of in bed, sad. And so I had a lot of nannies or like people who just kind of were in and out of my life depending on their job, who kind of were like the main people who looked after me. And sometimes they were nannies, sometimes they were housekeepers that just kind of made sure that I was okay. So there was a lot of like just circumstantial loneliness as well as being in the country that you're lonely.
I'm assuming you could speak Thai at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you still can.
I can, ish. I still watch some Thai soap operas just to like make sure it's still in there. Yeah.
So you could you were able to communicate inside of that space, but also did it feel like there was any relationship with the Thai people for you as a little kid and stuff, or was it just like, oh, here's this little kid that they kind of like see and try and make sure?
Well, I think that there's a difference between like feeling like you can feel understood versus like feeling like you can communicate and talk and have that. I don't think that I felt understood. It felt like I felt misunderstood by an entire country. But I was a very like friendly kid. But I mean, it's kind of nuts. Like I remember telling my husband this and he was like, that's really crazy. And like doesn't sound fun at all. But I was really lonely. And so I was so desperate for friends that what I would do is because my mom was sick and my dad was kind of not there a lot of my life. I would just kind of go up to random houses and knock on the door and be like, hi, do you want to be friends? And so I'd invite myself into people's houses and sit on their couch and watch cartoons with them, like random strangers. And so on one end, I got really good at talking to strangers.
Totally. How were they with that, by the way? Were they usually receptive, or was there ever danger in that? Or
I mean, there was definitely danger as far as like I was in a lot of risk for a lot of my life, but I wasn't really aware of that. But I do think like it, depending on your faith, but for me, it felt like the kindness of God, because a lot of people really took care of me when my parents didn't. So like I had some neighbors who kind of always made sure that I was fed on days that I didn't have food. And like I had one neighbor who always left their house open for me. So when they were gone, so when they were gone during the day to work, they would leave their house open so I could go in and I could raid their fridge if I was hungry. And so I would like eat cashews and watch cartoons until they came home from work. So it was a kind of a bizarre thing to do. That is
wild. So are you telling me that like mom's depression was like so heavy that she was just kind of completely gone inside of the house oftentimes?
She was really checked out a lot of it. And I think, also, understanding from my mom's perspective as an adult now, I think that I was the last kid, and I was the only kid that was kind of born into the situation where my mom was already really like traumatized by being there, so she was at like no capacity anymore by the time that I was a little kid. So when I was really little, a lot of the responsibility of like raising me fell on my sister. She was 9 years older than me at the time, so she was like the one who did a lot of the night watches and like fed me during the night, and then like made sure that I had food and like looked after me when I was like a baby.
Wow.
And then as I got older, she became depressed, which was a very kind of normal circumstance in our family, because everyone was sad and no one's needs were getting met and everyone was traumatized.
Just scattered, disconnected.
Yeah, kind of like everyone off in their own universes in the house, which I think is a common thing for a lot of us. Like regardless if you grew up in a foreign country or not, I think a lot of people know what it's like to grow up in a house where everyone's kind of disjointed and disconnected, and there's a lot of loneliness.
Right. You're all kind of just coexisting inside of a place.
Yeah.
And the most basic of needs maybe are the ones that are getting met. Like, I guess we got some food out of here today. And
yeah, I mean, sometimes.
Now, because you're making a point about food in that space, tell me a little bit about what that was like, because you said in order to get fed, sometimes you had to go to neighbors. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I felt a lot of scarcity about food growing up. I don't necessarily know if I would say that we always didn't have access to food all the time, but now looking back, I can see that my mom most likely had an eating disorder because of how she thought about how we were going to be fed. So she kind of always bought not enough, or kind of like didn't factor in the amount that we would need as a full family. So just context-wise, I have 2 older brothers and then an older sister and then me. Okay. And so now as an adult, I can see like the meals that she made were kind of more like meals for like 4 people as opposed to meals of like 6 people.
Gotcha.
And my mom grew up really, really poor. Like my mom had a lot of poverty. So she kind of grew up on microwave TV dinners and like didn't really know how to feed people either. She wasn't eating adequately herself. Wow. So it was a lot of just like generational stuff that was happening as far as how I experienced not feeling like there was enough food. I remember I would feel really guilty about eating food because in my mind it was like, I can't take the amount that I need, because if I take the amount that I need, someone else is not going to get enough. And so I remember just sitting at the table kind of thinking like, oh man, like I really want that, but I can't have that because if I have that, then my brother's going to be hungry. And so then I would go to bed really hungry and kind of sit there and obsess about food over and over and over and over and over again. And then at around midnight, I'll be like, maybe I can just go find something. So I'd like go downstairs and like I remember eating like weird things. Like I'd find like a can of corn and just like eat the whole thing, or like a jar of marinara sauce and just like eat out of the jar of marinara sauce.
I don't know if like there's this part of me that wants to laugh because it feels so absurd, and then the part of me wants to cry because
it's
like,
so sad.
Marinara sauce.
Oh yeah, and like I did because it's like a kid mind, right? You're not thinking like nutrition. You're just thinking like I'm hungry. What do I need? My
belly filled.
Yeah, and you're just thinking like the desperation of hunger, you know, like in my own journey and working through food stuff, something that a therapist that I met with talked to me about how the desperation feeling of hunger, it feels really traumatizing because you're just like in this sense of like, I don't know if my needs are going to get met. I don't know if it is ever going to happen again. So you just do whatever you can to avoid that emotion, right? So I'd eat ketchup and mayonnaise sandwiches because that was like what was available.
So it's just ketchup, mayonnaise, and bread?
And bread. And just eat that over and over. We had some rice sometimes. I would just do like rice and just like soy sauce and then eat that all day long. Or I'd put sugar on it. It's very like what a little kid thinks of as like, I'm hungry. I guess this is what I can make.
How did it feel like there was any awareness on your mom's end of the realities at all, or did it?
No, like I think when I told her this in adulthood, it was like new information to my mom. And I think that a lot of that comes from her experience with food. Like now I can see that like my mom in my mind has a lot of like symptoms of an eating disorder, as my dad does as well. So
wow.
Weird kind of behavior around food was kind of like in a way normal to them.
And you were saying that dad was really out. Was he out in the mission field trying to connect with people, or what was going on that dad wasn't there? Because I mean, obviously the story you're telling me, everything is like, was she really this abandoned? Because it feels like you're really, really abandoned in that. Was he?
Yeah, I mean, my dad, it's kind of a combination of things with my dad. Like he is a very kind of reserved, withdrawn personality on one end. Like, so he can be there and not really be there. Right. Like that was he was also like very passive, like never rock the boat, never want to create any conflict in life. Like he was very like, like just a presence that's there in our life, but maybe not directly like intervening on our behalf about things. And I think he kind of like let my mom kind of be the one who decided what happened with us kids. I think like if we're being really like thinking about my dad's psychology, he came from a really, really painful background. Like he had so much trauma inside of his life and so much just really horrible things that happened to him, which I won't go into just to protect him and his own story, but in ways that are probably some of the saddest situations of abuse I've probably heard in my adult life, which I say adult life because we had no clue that that's how he was raised until we were like much later. I had no idea.
And then you're like, oh my gosh, of course my dad was like that.
He had no coping skills. He was super dissociated. And I think, he was really scared of being his dad. Like, I think he was really scared of being the people that hurt him. And so I think the way that he kind of dealt with that was just to kind of remove himself entirely and be like, my kids know that I love them. And I'm just kind of leave the parenting up to my wife.
It's interesting because I want to just interject something there in that.
Yeah.
So, when we're listening to your story as you're starting to share it, and I brought up the idea of your dad, because in the background of anyone's head who's listening to a story from a 30,000 foot view, we go, oh, there's another neglectful dad who was just checked out, and somehow the wife's suffering and the kids are suffering. And those are conclusions that we can kind of draw in our own heads when we listen to that. But then we get in for a second, we hear, and you're like, oh yeah, by the way, my dad had an extremely abusive childhood that was, and he was just trying to be better than the people that raised him.
100%.
And I see that in a lot of stories is in our process of working out our childhood pain. There's seasons to go through the maybe the acknowledgement of the pain in a way that's even almost vilifying of like, I can't believe they did that. They left me. They abandoned me, whatever. And we work that as part of our soul out. And the long-term goal is that we get to a place of validating the realities of what we did or didn't have happen to us.
100%.
And then also the humanization of the people that were in authority around us till we go, oh, but I also see the places that their heart was twisted and the places they were doing the best they knew how with the mess that they came from.
Oh, 100%. I think I had years of just feeling angry with them. And I think that was necessary, And I think in hindsight, I feel much more, I guess like humanizing of my parents. Like, I don't think that they're the villains of my story, and I don't victimize them like they have no accountability. Like, I feel very much like, oh, they're adults and who had a lot of pain. And I think within the past 4 years of my life that kind of everything hit the fan, so to speak. I realized how crazy you can be when you're in trauma. Yeah. And I kind of had this moment of like realization that my crazy, because I was married at the time, and I'll go into a little bit more of what I'm referring to, but I was married at the time that I went crazy. And I realized like, oh, how I acted and how I disconnected and how I disappeared into myself actually had nothing to do with how much I loved my husband. Like, it actually had nothing to do with whether I cared about him or not. Yeah. And it had everything to do with I had literally no capacity or skills or tools to climb out of my trauma. And I think when I realized that for myself, like, oh, I could have loved my husband the most, and that wouldn't have changed how I processed this pain. Yeah. Or that I wasn't able to process this pain in a way that worked. Helps me understand my parents. Like, oh, actually it wasn't like personalized pain. Which is like, they abandoned me because they didn't love me. They didn't care about me. They didn't see me. It was like, oh no, this is how trauma works. Trauma makes you disappear from the people around you. That's
a really good statement. Trauma makes you disappear from the people around you. That's so good. Well, going back to your childhood, so you said you were there until 16. So again, your story, we're looking at it and we're going, okay, she's kind of being raised by her older sister in a lot of ways, and the community of people that she's randomly going over to for the majority of the time. Yeah. And kind of just in a lot of survival. And, and it continued that way all through being young till 16. Was it like living in that type of survival with relationships or?
Yeah, a lot of that. I mean, there was a point where my other siblings, because there's a pretty big age gap between me and everyone. So my brother is, the closest brother to me is 6 years older than me. So there was a period of time where they all left. Wow. And it was just me at home. And so I had some more like one-on-one with my parent, which, you know, you would kind of think that that would be a great idea. But I think everyone else leaving really triggered my mom's abandonment issues. And she felt so alone. And so it was like, Rachel's this like survival lifeline for me. And so she really hit like the apex of her depression during that time. Wow. And so I kind of stepped in as like, you know, the codependent counterpart, like trying to like
a caregiver.
Yeah, like take care of her. So it was kind of interesting because I had times of my life that I felt completely disconnected from my parents, like where it was like parents, who are they? Totally. Kind of feeling.
What's a parent?
What's a parent? I'm supposed to like have someone make sure that I'm not dying. That's a thing. It's so bad. And then this other time where I was almost like hyper enmeshed with my mom, where I was like trying to make sure she didn't die and like trying to make sure she didn't harm herself, and like that I was her friend and the person that she talked to about her life because she felt so much desperation inside of herself. And that was just an interesting dynamic to kind of go from like, none of my needs are taken care of here. And then also my needs aren't being taken care of here either. But I feel like I should feel better about it because at least they're paying attention to me.
But it's not, because it's more responsibility.
Because it's more responsibility. And there was a lot of weight inside of that. And in a lot of ways, I felt like my mom's significant other. You know, like the role that my dad really probably should have been filling, that I was kind of stepping into that place.
Which is interesting. There's a lot of that happens in childhood with kids where parents are fighting at war, completely disconnected, and they end up making that connection with one of the children. And it feels like they're buddies. And
and you know, in my mom's, like understanding my mom and having compassion for my mom, like I also know that my survival skills was a lot of people pleasing. So my survival skills, it wasn't as much like she was pushing herself on me. And sometimes it felt that way.
So your fawn response?
But my fawn response was like, oh my gosh, if I can make mom happy, then she will eventually see me. Like if I can fill her needs so much, if she's like a cup of water and I can fill it up enough that it will, maybe some of that will overflow back onto me. Like she will realize that she's my mom and that she wants to take care of me. And so like I always kind of knew like my mom loves me and like wants to nurture me and wants to take care of me, but because of her own suffering, in my mind, it was like, so if I can just get her to not suffer, then she'll be the mom of my dreams. I like to think of it as like Build-A-Parent. There's Build-A-Bear. Build-A-Bear. So I was like, how can we like fix all of mom's pain, plug all of her holes? Then she'll take care of me again. Isn't
that interesting? That's universally, I have so many kids that come through my office that are now full-grown adults.
Totally.
But as a kid, that's what they did. It was Build-A-Parent.
Yeah.
If I can do all these things, they will be okay enough to actually give me what I need.
100%.
And if it seemingly works at some level, then the control monster is hugely there.
100%.
Because if I could get my mom or dad to now respond like, oh, I can control in certain ways, other people and circumstances.
100%. And I think that like for me, I didn't realize that there was a difference between like being validated for my performance and like, oh, good little kid, gold star.
Right.
From connection and like the feeling of self-worth that you get inside of a parent bonding to you and saying, I see you, I care about you, no matter what you do, I like you and I want you here, and so I think a lot of us who didn't have that from our parent, we think the quickest way to feel some sense of okayness inside of ourselves is that gold star. Like, I just want them to think that I'm being good instead of
I love the gold stars. Young Justin loved them. He was like, I can get gold stars all day long.
100%. And it feels like there's something about that feels within our control, right? Like it's measurable. I can like succeed at this. I can just get them to think that I'm doing so good and what a great kid I am. But the sadness and the downside of that is that we still feel so much loneliness inside of that because we're not getting bonding and connection and acceptance for where we're at. We're just getting kind of like, ding, 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 you did good, kid. You're the best kid, which is kind of a golden prison. Yeah, right?
That's a great way to put it. It's a golden prison. Well, I know that in that, as the evolution of your journey happened, you found yourself at 16 having kind of a transition. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when I talk about this, this sounds a little wild that this was like a normal decision that we made. But I was really depressed, pretty much suicidal. Like, I was kind of on the border of like, I can't really function. I was in bed a lot. I was having I would call it like a mental breakdown.
Right.
Like I was in the middle of like a breakdown where I couldn't like get any motivation to do anything. So I just kind of like lay in bed and be sad for a lot of my life. And I think it really scared my dad. Like my dad didn't know what to do with that. He felt really out of control about that and really freaked him out. And so he was like, what do we do with this kid? So he kind of gave me the option. He was like, do you want to go to boarding school or do you want to move to America? Which in hindsight, I can think that's really sad that like his solution was like things that were like, go away.
Totally.
But looking at my dad's history, my dad was financially independent by the time he was 15 years old. His family was so chaotic that he started taking care of himself, working a full-time job by the time he was 15. And so in his mind, he was like, the best gift I can give you is the ability to be independent.
Right. To get out of our chaos or whatever problem is here and equip you and empower you to do.
Escape this crazy and go be independent. And that's the best gift that I can give you. And, now we've had conversations, my dad and I, where he's like, I can see now that really what you needed was support and me to be there for you and like for me to help fill in, understand where you were at emotionally. But at the time, he didn't know that. So I moved to America by myself a week after I turned 16.
Wow.
And it was a wild ride. I was shocked.
Who did you stay with?
People that I met on the internet.
Are you serious? Like what?
100%. And there was some security because my sister lived in town. I didn't end up living with her. And
okay, so you moved where she was living.
I moved her in the town that she was living, and I moved in with this family that I met on the internet that I had never met in person over there. And I remember the first night, like my parents sitting there and like signing away parental rights to these like perfect strangers, and it was such like a bizarre experience. Like, hi, how are you? Wild. Here's the rights to my child, because we were trying to figure out like how does she be here legally without any supervision. And so I think we signed over a few things, and then I think we did a lot of like emancipation type things where I could just like legally do everything that an adult would do by the time I was 16. And I was 16. I was really clueless. I didn't have to do anything.
This is wild. And these people, did they become actually like pseudo parents, adoptive parents, or were they just like, yeah, you got a place to stay, whatever? It
was very much the latter, which I didn't know at the time. Again, it was all just like in survival mode. You're not thinking about like, is this a good holistic plan? We're just thinking like, how do I get out? Like that was the idea. And so they very much just kind of left me to my own devices. And now looking back, I know that they were kind of going through some stuff in the family unit that we just like weren't aware of. And so I was kind of like plopped down in the middle of that. And I was kind of like, what's happening? I don't know. And so I lived with them for a while. They were kind, but again, like, I don't think that they realized the level of what I had come from either.
Right,
like
abandonment and stuff.
Yeah, like here's this kid who's never spent more than like a few months at a time in this country. And it's brand new experience. She doesn't know how to do anything. And
to go from Thailand to a very small, village would you say? Or
we kind of lived in a weird place where it was like 10 minutes from now is like grass huts, and then like 10 minutes from here is like skyscrapers. So it was kind of this weird in between. Yeah, but I mean, it's just still a completely different culture, like just a different way of being. I didn't know how to do anything. I kind of remember looking at like the dishwasher, being like, what the? Because I've never put anything in a dishwasher before in my life, and I didn't like know how to wash clothes or how to do anything just like a normal adult would know how to do. And I was just kind of trying to figure it out as I went.
Well, yeah. So you ended up in that, and you survived, obviously. Was there any highlights or details of that, like from 16 to whatever, that journey that?
Like I think a lot of times, I think I'm still kind of like figuring out that time, because I have a lot of mixed emotions about it. Because even though it was not an ideal circumstance, I still think that it was good that I got out of that other situation in Thailand. Like, there's a lot of me that's like, I still kind of like grateful. Like, I maybe had people who didn't know how to like help me, but they were kind to me. And it kind of gave me some distance from the really traumatizing, like chaotic environment that I was in. And so, like there were areas that I've had to grapple with as an adult of like what I term like gaps of like things that I don't know how to do as an adult that feels really hard because of just no one told me. And then I felt so much of my life feeling a lot of shame about not knowing how to do things, or like not knowing how to be an adult, or because of this time period that a lot of people would be like, okay, my kid's like going to be moving out soon. What do they need to know about their life? I never got that experience.
That nurturing development that would kind of like steward the next part of it. It's just like, you're kind of expected to know things that you could never really know. So you're having to just make observations about life, about culture.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out like, what do I do?
Yeah. And I think a lot of like, again, talking about like our fawn response, I think that I was definitely just like in that for several years, that I was like, don't rock the boat, try to make sure everyone likes me, try to make sure no one thinks I'm weird. How do I just like watch people and figure out like how to be an American? Like I didn't know how to do that. So I kind of felt like I was pretending to be an American for a while. Like, okay, like what are the mannerisms of an American person? What is the way of being of an American person?
It's interesting because what you're describing feels like you're describing being an alien. Like I'm an alien to another planet, and I'm going to watch how these creatures from this planet interact and respond. And now I'm going to try and just
try to emulate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
My goodness. So how did that kind of play a role? Because I know part of the conversation today that you wanted to talk about eating disorder processes and stuff like that. How did that affect you at that point in time? And where were you at with your relationship with food? And
well, I think body? That like, again, like in the context of like not knowing how to do anything, it applied to food. Like I didn't obviously like talking about what I experienced when I was a kid with like ketchup and mayonnaise sandwiches and stuff like that. Like I was kind of plopped into America, and it really felt scary of I didn't have resources. Like I felt really afraid about like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to make American food. I don't know how to like, because I known how to make Thai food my whole life. So I didn't know how to do that. And I felt a lot of like, I guess like anxiety about my own physical needs. Like I didn't know how to get them met. And so I kind of just like avoided them. So I remember that first year I would like go all day long without eating anything. So it would be like
in that first year here in America.
Yeah, first year I would just kind of go all day long, and I'd feel so much anxiety. Like I need to ask for help. Like I need to ask if someone can like help me figure out how to do this. But because of my childhood, that felt like I cannot do that.
No, like there's nothing that said I can go ask and get a need met.
100%. And that felt like a rule, like especially because I was fawning so much. I was like, I need people to like me. So people don't like it when you have needs, and they don't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
And so like I can't ask for help. So I would like wait forever until it was like the hunger monster was like swallowing me whole, you know? And I think that was a very triggering emotion because it was the same that I felt when I was a kid, that desperation of like, what is going to happen if I don't have enough food? And so then I would, you know, find whatever was available and kind of like go nuts, you know? And so
like gorge.
Yeah. Like, and I don't, you know, I guess now I would term it like sort of binging, but I didn't necessarily like think of it as like classically what you think of as like a binge where you're like eating everything in sight. It was more just like I'm eating past what I feel full about because I want to make sure that I can be okay tomorrow. Like,
could it have been like, I started with some peanuts and I ate an entire can of peanuts because my stomach was so hungry and way overate. Just it wasn't just gorging on anything you could get. It was just like I didn't know how to be connected even to my body and what it needed and when to stop. And it felt like there was never going to be more. Is that what it was?
Yeah, like I think, you know, my experience with eating more than I needed was more about fear of not having enough later, right? So I think that that's a lot of like the misconception about eating stuff is like overeating is just because we like to eat a lot. And where for me, it was a direct result of feeling restricted.
Scarcity.
And direct result of feeling like when I need something, I'm not going to be able to get it. I'm not going to have access to what I need when I need it.
What's interesting because that led to, I mean, talking about your weight, where were you kind of at some point?
You know, I was pretty thin when I moved from Thailand because I grew up in a family with eating disorders. So it was pretty tiny. And then I just kind of slowly gained weight over time. Right. And then I started dating my now husband. And this was a few years later. I didn't date him when I was 15, just so everyone knows. It was perfectly legal. Yeah, when we started dating, it was like, oh, I have access now because we were going on dates all the time and we were like going out all the time. And it was like the first time that it felt like it was almost like kid in the candy store, but also like afraid that I'm never going to be able to have candy again. So I would just like, we would go out and I'd feel this emotion of like panic of like, I don't know when I'm going to be hungry again. And if I'm hungry again, like that's going to be really horrible. So I need to make sure that I eat as much as I possibly can because I don't want to feel that emotion of hunger. I think, you know, something to mention about what in eating disorder recovery people talk about like is extreme hunger, which is in my mind kind of like where the physical hunger and the emotion of I am not going to hit my needs met kind of meet in this pinnacle where you just feel like so out of control and you're just like, I want to eat as much as I physically can because I don't ever want to feel what hunger feels like ever again.
It's kind of interesting because you see that inside of the context of food and stuff. Yeah. But there's so many other areas
so
where people
parallel.
where they feel so starved of relationship, nurture, care, whatever it is. And then it comes out in many other destructive manners. And food 100%. Just happens to be a...
Yeah, 100%. You know, something that my eating disorder like person, my therapist, as I went through this process kind of told me is that, you know, it's the relationship with how we relate to food is often how we relate to everything in our life. Our relationships with other people are often the same as our relationship with food. And so, you know, I had what I like think of as like a restrictive mindset about everything in my life. How do I suppress my needs, bury my needs, disappear to my needs as much as I physically possibly can until I can't handle it anymore? And then, well, I guess if I'm going to have some, screw it. And then you do the whole thing all over again. Like, I think it's this idea of like, I'm going to take as little as I possibly can in this life. I'm going to like ask for as little as I possibly can. That was my childhood. Yeah. Like, I'm going to make sure that I don't rock the boat, be as small as I can to survive the circumstance. And, just like if I asked you to hold your breath, if you hold your breath for a really long time, eventually you're going to have to take a really big breath after that. And I think that really encapsulated so much of my life, which is a be small, be small, be small, be small, be small. And then with my relationship with food, then I would feel out of control and then be like, I'm going to take all that I can when I can. Yeah. And then let's go back into the trying to be small again.
That I think that's very reminiscent of my childhood. Yeah. Was being as small and as little of a burden as possible to my parents, to the environment around me. Yeah. And then there was this thing of just gorging when I could get food, and it felt like it filled. I'd eat to the point of pain.
Yeah, 100%.
And I could feel the pain in my stomach, but I also felt like, okay, something's full for a second. Yeah. It was that trying to fill that soul, where my soul felt filled. Yeah. So that led into, as you were in that process, so you ended up, how much probably overweight do you think that you got to a point of?
Oh, I don't actually know, because I didn't weigh myself at the largest that I was. So I don't actually know. What I do know is that I had, so we'll go into it, but I went into a really traumatized season, and then I thought, really good idea is to try to lose all this weight. And so I lost over 150 pounds. So that's a big change.
Which was crazy because before, when you were around us, it was like you left with your husband, went to Indiana to deal with some family stuff, which you're about to get into. And when you come back, I literally didn't recognize you. Like, had no idea who you were. There was two entirely different human beings. Yeah. And I was just flabbergasted. Yeah. By it. But you literally lost the weight of another human being. Like, you had two human beings, because you're a little tiny person. It's not like you're like a very tall girl.
Yeah, I'm only 5'4". So 150 pounds on a 5'4" person is a dramatic.
Yes.
Is a dramatic body change.
Absolutely. So as you had gotten bigger and whatnot, and you got married and stuff, you guys ended up in your situation. You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the the storm of my life. No. I got married, and we, thank the Lord, like, we had known each other for a while. So it wasn't like this is a brand new person that I'm married to. Like, it wasn't like a 6 months engagement. We'd known each other for a couple of years. But 3 months into us being married, my husband's mom gets sick. And we don't really know at that time, like, what's going on. She's kind of like having some symptoms that she can't really explain. And he's kind of worried about it, but we're not really like fully thinking this is a really big deal. Yeah. Until about the start of our second year of marriage. So she was sick for a while, and we're trying to figure out like what was going on. And then second year of marriage, she gets diagnosed with ALS, which, for those who don't know, it's a terminal disease. So you basically are just, all the function of your body is slowly shutting down until you die.
Is ALS also known as Lou Gehrig's disease?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So you're not losing. One thing that a misconception about it is that a lot of people think that it means that you lose your cognitive function, like that you're not yourself. But that's not actually true. You're losing your you're losing your ability to control your body. And so it starts with her muscles in her leg kind of stopped working, and then all of her ability to like control her body shut down to where she, lost the ability to swallow, lost the ability to speak. You can't move anything. So it's almost kind of like you're paralyzed. And then eventually, a lot of times, it just your muscles and your ability to breathe and to swallow. So a lot of people just kind of, how they die is they either starve or they drown.
Wow.
Because you just have you don't have any kind of control over your body. So you just kind of like slowly die that way. So
what happened when you guys found out about that?
Well, me and my husband both individually went into our trauma responses from our childhood. And he's like, so some context on my husband. He was the only child. And he spent his life kind of being like the mediator between his parents. His parents kind of like stayed together for him, so they fought his whole life. And so he was like,
he's the glue,
and he's his mom's spouse in a lot of ways. Like, he's the one that she relies on. He's the one that she counts on. And he's like, I can't live with myself if I fail my mom and like while she's dying. Right. And then, so this brings up all of my beliefs from childhood of like, okay, how to be good. It feels like the most important thing. How do I do the morally good thing in this situation? So I'm thinking, feels super normal for us to go be super self-sacrificial, go martyr ourselves to this situation.
You get as small as possible.
We get as small as possible and become whatever it is that other people need. How do I bury everything that I feel? And I immediately went into like, hey, I'm not allowed to have needs or feelings, because what kind of horrible person this was the belief, what kind of horrible person is like mad at their husband or feels lack inside of that marriage or has any needs from this person while their parent is dying? Like, so for me, I was like, this is clearly a level 10 situation. And the only way that I had known how to survive level 10 situations was to disappear.
Well, here's his mom in bed.
Yeah.
And here's your mom in bed.
Yeah.
Right. You're
100%
exactly back in your childhood again. Yeah. And it's invited you to decide to get healing and actual health this time.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, long way to get there. Chaotic way to get there. So we immediately kind of go into like our responses. And I'm so afraid, like, if we don't do everything that, to take care of his mom, my husband's going to resent me. He's going to resent all of my needs. And I'm going to feel so much shame inside of myself for needing anything from him while his freaking mom is dying. Like, and so I had a lot of judgments about any emotions that I might have. I was like, wow, I can't have emotions because it's not my mom.
Yeah.
Like, it's not my family. So like, I'm not allowed to experience any pain or lack or any negative emotions. My role is to be like the good supportive wife and to be so freaking nice to him and meet all of his needs. And then, I felt motivated. I was like, yes, I'm going to go be the best freaking wife. He's going to owe me so much for this.
And the slow build of bitterness and resentment
begins straight away. And, I definitely thought, okay, you know what? I know how to make people happy. I know how to be this like very codependent person that just kind of like takes care of everyone, and that's going to be great. And that's how I'm going to survive it. And then after it's all over, he's going to have to remember that he's married to me, and then I'll be fine.
Do you think that, do you remember at all any people throwing up red flags outside of you? Or
Well, Abby, I love that you're hinting that. Do you remember anyone saying that this might be hard? You and Abby. Yeah. And I think that this is where I have a lot of compassion on trauma now, because it was like, I couldn't hear it. Like, it didn't matter who was like, hey, this is crazy. Hey, this is a bad idea. And in my mind, it was like in one ear, out the other. And in context, like myself, I'm a rule follower. I'm an obedient person. In normal context, if someone's like, Rachel, go do this, I'm like, okay, will do. Thank you very much. But yeah, it didn't matter. I was so like wrapped up in, my trauma response, which was, this is what it means to be good.
And that's what a lot of people don't get. I want to say this to build compassion for people. So when Abby and I deal with people in our close personal circle, and even clients that we've met with, when we can tell that people are in trauma responses, we are going to speak truth so that there's something for them to grab hold of at some point. But we have compassion, because I don't ever think like, what the hell's wrong with them? They won't listen to anything I say. I just look and go, they're in their trauma response.
Yeah.
They don't have capacity to actually fully hear this.
100%.
But again, there's a safety rope to grab hold of when there's moments where they can get shaken out of trauma response and be like, oh, somebody's been saying something. I should go maybe grab hold of that real quick.
Totally.
If there's a glimmer of light for them in the moments. And so I think that a lot of times we as human beings have strong judgments when people go through tough seasons like that. Why is that guy being such an asshole? Or why don't they listen to me or whatever?
Instead of being an idiot?
Instead of actually having a lot of patience and kindness and gentleness and being like, I see that there's probably a lot. I mean, because when we're hearing, again, I had you talk about your story because when we reflect, if someone steps into your moment and they just see the exchange that's happening with you and Kyle and his parents as things are starting to melt down, which you're going to go into a little bit more, they may be like, what the hell's her problem? But if you don't have context for the whole story and you go all the way back to Rachel's childhood and you go, this is her childhood trauma reliving itself out 1,000%.
100%. And I think, that's the nature of complex trauma. It's like this certain circumstance really mirrored everything kind of just right, that it shook the foundation of who I was and kind of reverted me back to whatever felt the safest. Right. Like it brings you back to whatever response that you think this is the best way to handle the situation.
Which for a little girl, because now you're a little child again, right?
100%.
You're flashing back to being a little child.
Yeah.
And her trauma response was fawn.
Yeah. And to disappear and to go into, being so little and trying to take up as little as humanly possible and being so like, I think, for me, something that I think is really interesting that can happen in trauma is you get kind of almost like obsessed with morality. Like you want to be good so bad. And it's the idea of like, if I'm good, then I can avoid pain. Like if
I can stop this. If I can do everything right.
If I can do everything right and, trying to do everything right while something as chaotic as someone is dying of a terminal disease, it's just not really a winnable thing.
Yes. No, it's impossible. Right?
Yeah.
So as you're going into that, you kind of talked about your body and the coping, what did that look like? Like what was provoking it? Like, I'm going to go over, tell us about that. Yeah.
So, landing in, to give some information. So we moved to Indiana to take care of his mom while she dies. We live in their basement.
Oh my gosh. Not even on the bed. Like how many people want to live in their parents' basement when their parents are in a good spot?
And like you have no space, you have no boundaries. And then you think, so ALS is a very, I don't think that many people know like the level of care that someone with ALS needs. So we had, full-time caregivers. We had, hospice around for the last 6 months of her alive life, maybe even more, because they kind of told us that was also traumatizing because they told us it could be any day now for like 6 months. So we were in this like waiting for her to die for a very, very, very long time.
And for him, he has no permission to get out at that point internally, as a side note. You're going, oh my God, my mom could die tomorrow. I don't know, like that tomorrow, 100%. However long that is, I'm here waiting it out.
Yeah. And I mean, he's experiencing like some of the most traumatizing things that I thought like, I can't handle how this feels inside of my body. Like his mom would be melting down, freaking out because she couldn't hit the button that like ringed for, she couldn't move her finger enough to hit the button to ring for his help. And she'd be sitting there choking. She's panicking, thinking that she's going to die choking on her own saliva. And she couldn't like move her finger enough to hit the button. It's just, she's freaking out thinking that she's going to die. And that's like every couple of days.
Wow.
And so like there's things like that. And then she really wanted to die, obviously, because she was, in that level of suffering, there is this part of you that's just like, I want this all to be over. And so she'd beg him to kill her,
which is reasonable.
Yeah. She'd be like, I want you to shoot me. I want you to, put a pillow over me and strangle me. And he's sitting there thinking like, how do I handle the situation? Like he is so frozen in the situation. I couldn't even
believe, like I want to sob for him to be faced with that.
It was just an insanely traumatic experience. And then, that applied to our life. So there was like, we couldn't go to Target without both of us feeling like she could die while we're at Target. Like one thing that really like helped me understand the level of just like trauma that we were in is after she died, we went to a movie And I remember sitting there feeling so anxious the whole movie. And I kept unconsciously checking my phone. And I realized what I was doing. This was even after she passed. I was checking to make sure that we didn't getting a text that she was dying. Like I was doing it over and over. Like, so we were so like just in the state of hypervigilance, waiting for like trauma to happen, waiting for the bus to hit us.
Isn't that crazy? Like it's one thing to have somebody randomly die and you don't have the buildup of it. And you're like, oh, that was so sad. And there's a lot of grief. Someone just randomly died. But to be on the verge of that for how long?
Well, months,
6 months. But I mean, even prior to that, it was like she was getting really bad and could potentially. But now you have maybe almost 6 months worth of.
Yeah. And that was like
on high alert.
100%. And that was a lot of like, when you're in fight or flight, you don't think of like, hey, how do I get out of this situation? Because it didn't necessarily, we were like, well, she could die. And this is kind of what we were told. She could die in like 6 months or she could die tomorrow. And so it made it really hard to like make decisions.
Well, yeah, to make your life move forward. And do I just stay living here? Because I know that there's a lot of expectations for you guys or Kyle to even take care of her. Wasn't there?
I mean, there was a lot of pressure because of the family role that we were already kind of dropped into. There was like, Kyle was the person who was making all the choices, like all of the end of life things and all of the care decisions, and all that fell to him because of his dad, all of their marriage stuff, and the fact that he was the only kid and the only family member. So her family was dispersed all over because she wasn't American. She had like family members in the UK, and like she had a sister who lived in the States but was somewhere else.
Wow.
And so he was like the only one, which was insane.
So you guys are probably in the place of imploding in the relationship, or in what?
Yeah, so I go into it thinking I'm going to be the best wife ever. I'm going to be so freaking supportive. I played this nice little caregiver role my whole childhood. And so I go into it, and basically all of my childhood happens again.
Yeah.
Where he, is so swallowed by his mom that
dad's gone.
Dad's gone.
Right.
And his mom is literally dying. She has nothing to give. She's in bed all the time.
Yep. So your mom's in bed.
Yeah. So
your
my mom's in
husband
bed.
is dad leaving.
Yeah. And he, my husband is doing my greatest fear, which is that he's kind of abandoned the marriage. I think during that time I was a little bit like the third wheel. Like he was married to his mom.
Right.
He was her spouse.
Right.
And I was the third wheel other person in the marriage, in the relationship.
That's so wild that your whole childhood is now. It's interesting too, because our childhoods want to resolve themselves. Like our lives want to give us redemption.
Yeah.
And
100%.
resolution. And now you're here back in the situation where life is saying like, let's actually resolve this. But part of what you're doing is you're coping. Yeah. And what was that coping that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Because you didn't have any power over, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, it was the most chaotic, out of control situation I think that you can be in. And so I went into, okay, how do I be in control? Here's my body. It's the only thing that feels like it's in my realm of influence.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be so powerful and I'm going to lose all this weight, and I'm going to manage everything so perfectly. And again, it was a little bit about morality. Like I was trying so hard to be a good wife, and I kind of felt like I was failing at that because there was a no-win situation, in the sense of like my husband was going to be traumatized whether or not I was the best wife. But because of my belief system of like, if I'm good, everything will be fine. And here's a situation that is so not fine at all.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm failing. I'm screwing up. Like I'm clearly not being the good little girl that I'm supposed to be. And so what's something that I can do that feels like I can definitely be the good little girl in? And that to me was about my body and about my weight and losing all of this weight and being so in control, and to the point that it was extremely compulsive. Like my husband was laughing at me the other day because he said, I remember when you used to say things like, oh, I'll just get to a size 4, and then when I'm a size 4, I'll stop. Or like, oh, I'll just get to a size like 2, and then when I'm a size 2, I'll stop. Wow. And then, to the point that I dropped within the span of a period of time, I don't even remember what my lowest weight was, but I was about 2 pounds away from hospitalization. And later on in my recovery journey, as I kind of regained the weight, my nutritionist that I work with now, she let me know, she's like, hey, just so you know, like if you had gotten a cold, you would have died.
Wow.
Just want you to be aware that that's happening. And there was truth to that. Like, I was talking to my husband about this last night, that because of the environment of my childhood of like, no one needs get met unless you're at a level 10. I think there was a part of me that was like, I'm going to put myself in starvation. I'm going to put myself in crisis. I'm going to put myself into level 10 pain, and I'm going to compete with your mom of who's suffering enough. Yeah. And I don't think like at the time I wouldn't have consciously thought that.
No one would.
Yeah. But, I think that that's the nature of pain a lot in trauma. It's like, in that corny YA book, it's like it demands to be felt. It's the same idea. It's like my pain needed to be seen so badly that it took on like an external manifestation.
Isn't it interesting that in your journey to suppress your pain, you also, your soul was fighting so hard to keep you from suppressing it?
Yeah.
It's like, Rachel, leave me alone. You're like, no, suppress. And it's like, no, I have to be seen. And finally it's like, fine, starvation. We're going to get so sick that it demands that someone sees this. And so that personal war that's happening there, like it wasn't necessarily like, it's definitely Kyle disconnected in that whole process and dissociated and just went into survival himself. Yeah. But you really were the one that abandoned yourself in that.
100%. And that's what I want people to know about, eating stuff and food, is that it really is a form of self-abandonment. We're saying, and it's about how we experience our own needs and our own existence in the world more than it's about food necessarily. And so I kind of think it's like, it can be about any coping mechanism. We can like insert controlling coping mechanism here.
Totally.
Right? It's kind of the similar idea, is like, I'm going to find, if I can't, one of my therapists helped me have an idea of like, we bond to our eating disorder when we don't feel like we can bond to other people.
Wow. And so, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So I think that was a big thing that happened inside of me, which was that, hey, over here, is all this abandonment, all these feelings of my needs aren't going to get met. And I feel a lot of shame about saying, hey, I have feelings, I have needs, I have pain inside of this experience. So I'm going to funnel all of that into this coping mechanism that at least I can feel like I'm being good. At least I'm like, everyone around me is saying, oh, good job, you lost all that weight. Or, oh, good job, like you controlled yourself so good. You had so much self-control. Good, you, high five, that whole moment. For me. Right.
So there's part of the performer accolades, the gold star accolades that happen inside of that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then at the same time, there's also a screaming that says, no, I really actually need you to see that this is a problem. That I'm actually in pain right here inside of this. What an interesting
dichotomy
that you're stuck in a situation like that. What did you what conclusion did you end up coming to? When did you realize like, oh, this is actually really destructive for me?
Yeah. A lot of me, it controlled my life. So meaning that like I couldn't go a day without working out for 4 hours a day.
Wow.
I couldn't eat anything that I hadn't weighed or logged first. I had a list of all the things that I could and could not eat. So I had a lot of like, I had a lot of morality attached to food. So if I ate something that I felt like I shouldn't eat, I'd have a full-blown meltdown because I thought that I was bad.
Wow. What hell, right? Like there's a tormenting hell inside of that.
It was probably the most hell I've ever been in. And in a way, it felt like an escape from my pain because it was a way to like turn the volume up on all these behaviors where I was so focused on like everything that I ate and everything that I did and every behavior that I had. So I didn't have to pay attention.
Well, and it's a severe dissociation from this circumstance, 100%. Right?
Yeah. It's a 100% a form of dissociation. I don't want to feel what's inside of my body. I don't want to feel the chaos that's inside of me. So I'm going to turn the volume up on all of these behaviors that just take over my life to avoid the suffering that's inside of me that I'm super scared of what's going to happen if I uncork that.
It's really interesting too, because you think about people who are in any forms of addiction And oftentimes addiction gets a bad rap where it's from a judgmental place. We look at people and go, what the F is wrong with you? How could you do that? That's so bad and that's so wrong. Rather than, oh, this person unconsciously may be screaming, will you see how much pain I'm in?
Yeah, 100%. And like I had a similar thing as like a lot of addicts because I didn't like decide to change because I thought I would like to say I got some self-worth and I decided that this would be a good idea. No, it was an intervention. Like people in my life were like, hey, this is really scary. And my husband was like, hey, it feels like you're going to die. And I don't want to watch like another woman in my life die. And
you suddenly got his attention.
I suddenly got his attention, which was, a catch-22 because on one end it was like, oh, you finally saw that I'm suffering and you finally noticed that I'm suffering. And it didn't like fix anything for me. And I realized like, oh, it's actually like, it's not about whether or not he paid attention to me. It was about my own system of self-abandonment that I learned to cope from when I was a kid and my own system of restriction of my own self to make room for others in situations of trauma and pain.
Wow. So you were able to, I know we're getting close to wrapping this up, but you had been doing consulting prior to that season and successfully. People were getting really touched and transformed. I had so many people come through, let us know about how profound their time was with you. What was happening for you? Because I think that this is a really big deal to bring this up.
Yeah.
What did it feel like for you to go into such a meltdown, to go from, hey, I'm over here with a lot of capacity to love and help people get growth and development, and then I'm over here a complete utter shit show, like, for lack of better language, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that it was probably one of my first coping mechanisms that I felt like this coping mechanism maybe is like makes me better than everyone else. Like, so because it felt like I lost all this weight. Everyone was kind of like talking about how great it was that I lost all this weight. So it took me a long time to actually be like, hey, I'm in a prison that is killing me. And a lot of that too was that I felt a lot of shame. Like you were saying, like I was helping people. I was working through other people's issues and felt so much compassion for other people, but something was going nuts on the inside of me. And so it felt really hard for me to be like, no, this thing that I kind of know is like a bad thing that I'm doing. Well, bad,
Destructive.
I don't like using the term bad because I think that there's a lot of shame about coping mechanisms in general. And I just have a lot of compassion on why I used that and why that felt good to me and safe to me at the time. But it was really hard for me to say, hey, I've been over here trying to help other people, but really I'm falling apart and in the biggest breakdown of my life.
Well, I think that the reason that I kind of pointed that out is that I think that people think that there's some crux that we're supposed to come to, this epitome of life where we're so great and we have it all together, and then we never have any problems. And also, in order to love and help people, that we have to be able to have it all together. And part of the conversation here around the connected life is about the idea of the messiest things.
Yeah.
And being able to give out of a place of our messiness of like, this is the capacity that I have.
100%.
I can love at this level and I can help at this level. And this doesn't mean I arrive somewhere. This just means that there's something that's inside of my journey that I'm able to steward and give away into other people's journeys. And I am in necessary need of nurture and care and help as well inside of my story.
100%. Something that I think of now, like the gift inside of that experience was that, when I kind of decided to be like, no, like I'm a mess. I am having a full-blown breakdown is, it really tenderized me and it really made me humble in a new way that was like, hey, like I thought I kind of had some arrogance where I was like, I have the answers. I've been trained by Abby for so many years. I'm the best emotionally healthy person. And then I had the biggest breakdown that I've ever had in my life, like right after however the most quote unquote healthy I thought that I was, and however much I arrived. And I think that really gave me compassion for kind of humanity, like that this is the nature of trauma, is that we can be anywhere and become anything. Like with the right cocktail, inside of us,
it can blow us up.
We can find ourselves anywhere. And so I think that really changed like even my perspective of humanity, like giving up a lot of judgment and forgiving, myself for my own humanity, and in having compassion and releasing judgment for myself. I think it really connected me to this idea of like, hey, we're all exactly the same.
Yeah.
We're all exactly the same. We can all have the kind of the right pain things that happen that send us all in a tailspin, and there's no judgment inside of that. Like we really can find ourselves anywhere. One
of the things that I hope for, that as people are listening to this, I hope that even out of your story and ultimately out of our podcast in general, is that the people that listen become a people of compassion, a people of understanding,
totally,
a people of humility, that says, I don't have all the answers. I could be that same person at any moment. And that grace overflows people's life, where they realize that we're really living out of grace. It's the grace that gets Justin out of bed every morning. It's a grace that empowers him and equips Abby to be able to do the podcast or do the things that we do, or it's grace that, continues to perpetuate the development of Rachel's life. And that people like all of a sudden would go, I'm not, when it comes to even understanding things that they start developing understanding of listening here, that they wouldn't go down the road of thinking I'm better than other people, or I know more, that they'd go, oh, the more I actually understand, the more humility should actually be developed inside of my process.
Yeah, I really think that, like, I think through this journey of like the pursuit of wholeness should also be bringing you, not being better than or less than anybody. That the pursuit of wholeness should be constantly reminding you that you're the same as everyone, and that you're worthy of the same amount of compassion, you're worthy of the same amount of care, and you're worthy of like the same amount of love, but it's not because you're better than or worse than anyone.
Yeah. In kind of closing statements, are there any final things that you feel like are necessary to communicate? And is there anything that you want to say specifically to the community of people that actually battle with eating disorders?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a million things that I could say, but I hope that, in listening to this, that there's some compassion inside of that, and, really reminding us that we can explore what it looks like to look at our pain in a non-judgmental way. Like I got the most breakthrough when I was able to just kind of embrace that I was a mess, and embrace that, like, I didn't have to prove that I was better than, or I didn't have to like prove that I had anything together, that I could just embrace the fact that I was falling apart. And, as far as like, if you are struggling with eating that is taking over your life, some of the best things that I did was actually surrender control to professionals.
Yeah.
Like at one point or another, I was meeting with a therapist 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And so it was literally to the point of like, I needed to talk about my own pain and get it outside of myself over and 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 over until, it felt like some of the bucket of all that pain and trauma started to lessen and started to get a little lighter.
So, so you're saying part of your healing was the acknowledgement that I'm not okay first off.
100%.
Instead of just being like, no, I'm good. No, I'm not good.
Yeah.
Then I need to talk about the ways that I'm not good. Were there just a couple other parts of your experience that help in the restoration of your heart to where you weren't trapped in this any longer? Community, connection, any things like that? Or
yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, again, as I said before, that a lot of times an eating disorder is we bond to that because that feels invulnerable. Right? Like we bond, I think that's coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms is we bond to whatever feels invulnerable, because eating can't reject me. Eating can't abandon me. Eating can't make me feel like crap about myself. Eating can't do any of that for me. So that feels safe. And so I think a lot of my recovery was about trying to bond with people again.
Yeah. There was a big moment between you and I.
Yeah.
Where was that in your journey, just real fast? And because you're talking about bonding to people and the vulnerability of stuff, and I didn't want to touch that unless that was something you wanted to touch. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that was a really meaningful point in my process, but it was probably before I really acknowledged that I had anything. I was dying, like you could literally see that my body was falling apart.
Yeah,
and I was at such a depleted state, and you called me and you came and got me and brought me in your office, and I sobbed for I don't even know how long. And it was even just like you would have me say, I don't want to die. I want to live. And I remember for me at that point, that was like the only thing that I really could hang on to. It's like, no, I don't actually think I want to die. Mm-hmm. I don't think I want to die. I think I want to be alive. And okay, we're going to do this alive thing. And yeah, I think it was about the humility of that too. Like me kind of saying like, I'm not going to pretend with Justin. I'm not going to pretend that I survived this traumatizing experience in a way that was super cool and that gave me lots of gold stars. Like, no, I'm a mess, and this has broken me in a way that I didn't know I could possibly break. And here's this person who sees me in that and is loving me anyway. And
that was a big one of the keys I'm talking about, and I'm not bringing it up because of me, but is you choosing into the invitation when Justin's like, hey, we need to talk. Yeah. And then you said yes finally to that invitation of love.
After saying no first.
Yes.
Like, no, I'm busy. I can't see Justin.
I'm good. And then it was you allowing yourself to be nurtured as I held you and as I was with you and let you cry in that space.
100%.
And you continue to do that inside of spaces with people and
myself.
And yourself.
Yeah.
And really, it was you deciding I don't want to die as well. Like you pointed that out, like, no, I don't want to die. I want to live, because a lot of this, our souls go, I give up. I'm not getting the attention. I'm not getting my needs met, my pain paid attention to. So yes, I'm done. I tap out. I don't want to live. And a lot of conditions that people are in, the destructive cycles they're in, is a relationship with death. Like they don't know it consciously, but you've made a partnership with death and said, I don't want to live. And all of these decisions are all part of me just wanting to die, not exist, be gone, be small, all of this. And so part of the crossroads of healing also begins when we say, I want to live.
Yeah.
I choose to live. I want to live. And can I make this life something? Because oftentimes when you're in that type of powerless, out of control trauma, it says, I can't affect my own life, so I would rather die.
Yeah.
But when we have an alertness or an awareness of, actually, your life can be affected. It can be changed. You can do something about it. It has to begin with you saying, I want to live, and I want to live on the terms of actually finding healing, having a voice, getting connected, getting my needs met, being nurtured, all of that stuff. Yeah. It changes everything. And I see you now today, and it's like, sure, you still have your messiness, like Justin has his messiness, but there's such an extreme difference between now and then based on your journey of choosing the vulnerability, choosing to see yourself, choosing to let other people see you. And that was a road to restoration.
100%. And I think it's choosing life is also choosing that I want to have a life more than just surviving.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think that's a lot of restriction and eating disorder is as little as possible.
Yep.
And it was a point in my recovery when your body's function starts to like go crazy because it wants you to stay alive. Like at one point I was so little in my weight that I started growing really, really thick, fine hair all over my body. Wow. And what that means is your body is so cold that it's literally fighting to keep you warm that it will like grow you a coat.
Wow.
And when my nutritionist told me that, and it was like this weird light bulb moment that's like, my body wants to live.
Right.
Like God literally made this body because it wants to be here. It wants to take up space. It wants to need things. Like our body is literally wired to be like, feed me. And if you don't feed me, I'm going to start shutting down and screaming at you until you feed me. And it was this idea of like making peace with the needs in my body helps me make peace with my emotional needs, with my spiritual needs, with, my relational needs. All of that felt so interconnected. But your body wants to live. I think that was a big turning point for me, was just kind of realizing like, no, I want to be here.
Yeah. Wow. Rachel, I just want to thank you for letting us in on that. I mean, that's so much vulnerable information to like invite the world into your story like that. But I know that it's such a healing opportunity for so many. Now, I don't know, I'm asking you this on the fly, is are there ways people could contact you if they wanted to meet with you? Or are you taking on more people still at this point in time?
Yeah.
Because I know you've been working with people and stuff, and you're in a great place, and Abby and I are tracking with your story and things like that. And we're so proud of who you are and even in your messiness, right?
Yeah.
It's not just you've got a gold star.
100%.
We really love who you are and how you process life. And now that you're well on the other side of that season, I feel like there's such intricate keys that you have for people through their trauma journeys.
Yeah.
And there's such a deep safety to be in your space. So what is a way that people could connect with you if they wanted to?
Yeah. I mean, my email
is
just Rachel Hughes. So Rachel Hughes, Hughes, consulting @gmail.com. And yeah, that's probably the best way to get contact with me, because I have an assistant who makes sure that everyone who emails me actually gets a response. Because if I was in control of that, it's 50-50 if you can get in contact with me.
You are Abby.
100%. I don't even want to tell you how many unanswered text messages are just sitting in my phone right now. It brings my husband so much anxiety. He's like, how do you live like this?
That's hysterical. Yeah. Well, you guys, if you were impacted by this, share this with people. People need to hear stories like this of the journey of both pain and resolution. And also share the podcast. And if you want to check out more about us, go to justinabi.com. That's justinabi.com. You can get on our mailing list if you want. You can get a hold of From Crappy to Happy, 7 steps to a happier life. And that's for free there. And rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. That is so helpful.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I got all the information out there.
You was good at that.
I've done that.
Yeah, you did it. You did good.
All right. Go away, Rachel.
Bye.
Bye.